Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Friend. It is your Wednesday edition. That's right, I'm your host, Big Daddy Liberty, and I'm not alone. As always, I've got trusty colleagues in here. First on my right is Sarah Gon. She's the Daily Friend editor, chief editor, excuse me. And of course, we have Marius Ruet, who's also our head of campaigns here. Guys, good morning.
Good morning.
Hello. I'm super excited today because we're chatting about our favorite political party. This is a political party that does so well and loves this country. You know, they have the perfect ideology where fairies and fairy dust will be sprinkled all over and all our problems will go away. I'm talking, of course, about the EFF. Guys, the EFF, funny articles have come up about them. They've been in the news cycle quite a bit. Two things we'll discuss today. Number one is a piece by Marianne Tam, rather amusing one, where she chronicles essentially the hypocrisy that we've come to endure, if that's the word, by the EFF. You know, they've spent 60,000 Rand on a lavish Camps Bay, villa, the most expensive booze, I can't even pronounce some of the French names of this, 700 Rand a pop type bottles. And of course, other allegations of, essentially an evening of lechery and revelry during what was the SONA debates at the time in Cape Town. Is this the EFF rephrase? Is the EFF really the supposed vanguard of the poor when in reality the lifestyles they lead versus what they tell people should be living are so different?
Well, I think in a way, ironically it is, because in typical sort of Communist Party leadership fashion, the poor remain poor, everyone else gets poor, and the leadership lives high on the hog. And it's a tendency, I suppose, to believe that they are leading the vanguard, so they kind of deserve special treatment. But the answer is no, and it's also no because their policies are, they're just utterances. Even if they're filled with verbiage, they no idea how they're going to create this communist utopia.
And that's the real kicker, isn't it, Maurice? It's the idea that on the one hand, it's a it's all this leftist rhetoric, fluffy economic policy, and of course we've just come from election, and a manifesto full of all this socialist mantra. But in reality, for the top brass, they're more equal than others, aren't they?
Well, I saw something where it said socialism is actually socialism for everybody except the elite. And
much.
Also another little term, you can vote your way into socialism, but you got to shoot your way out.
Very much so. Very much so.
We must be. I don't think there's anything wrong with the EFF leaders living this high life or whatever.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it seems very clear that they're not living this high life on their salaries. I mean, we've seen all kinds of things from the EFF. I mean, it started with On Point in Limpopo with Julius Malema up to VBS now very recently. There's been allegations about stuff happening in municipality of Johannesburg. So I think that's what the question. Nobody begrudges them enjoying their lives and on the salaries that they receive from Parliament. But I think it's quite clear that they're living these lavish lifestyles on possibly on money that they haven't earned legitimately.
Yeah, including allegedly money that they illicitly may have earned from VBS, the VBS heist. But you struck a bit of an issue here that I want to just quickly unpack. You're right. No one has a problem with a public rep, because they earn really good salaries. I mean, $1 million plus. No one would have a problem necessarily with them living a lifestyle that reflects their income, right? I think the real issue here comes, and anybody watching might be thinking, but hang on, these are the same people who will chastigate rich South Africans for living a high life. At the same time, again, labeling them all sorts of things, white monopoly capital, the greedy man, the man's out to get you, that sort of rhetoric. And at the same time, stand in front of a rally full of thousands of their supporters who happen to be some of the poorest people in this country, and make an argument that somehow their lifestyle and theirs being the EFF leadership should reflect somehow a recognition, a consciousness, a class consciousness of the plight of the poor. Somehow spending 60 grand on expensive champagnes and high-end eats and villas that are owned up allegedly by foreign nationals, which is is another thing that was called out as a bit of a hypocrisy in the piece. They slate foreign ownership of land in this country almost daily in the thingies. But here they are now renting from a foreign national, so allegedly a German national, and that money supposedly will then obviously go to Germany. It's the hypocrisy, isn't it, that sort of grates people's, you know what?
Yeah. I think what's revealing about this piece is that Marianne Tham's investigation, shall I call it that, looked into an area that no one would think of. I mean, it's been done before, but it's, hey guys, if you want to see how a group of people live or party, let's look at their trash. Yeah. And in that respect, it's very revealing because it gets them in an unconscious moment. The other thing, I think it's also jars because not only are these potentially criminal issues about confronting the EFF, but also the fact that the EFF has made some incredibly silly strategic mistakes by defaming people in public, losing the cases, trying to take them on appeal, and then expressing the desire that that the privilege you get in Parliament to say these things should extend to the open space. And no country in the world does that. You're not intended to do that. So it's kind of, I don't know what they're thinking at the moment.
Just let me move into a different space because I'm also not going to let the journalists get away with this. For the longest of times, journalists have been the ones who essentially let this tiger out the cage and rode it. Now that they've jumped off and it's beginning to bite them, now we're seeing this sort of rush by the media to find anything and everything about the EFF to write negatively about. And I'm going to come to you, Morris, about this one. But when it relates to this particular piece, my little bit of criticism of it is that Mariam also writes unashamedly and openly as a lefty, as a socialist. She basically goes on this weird little rant in the sort of near the end of the piece around how a proper socialist government, communist government, which she references Portugal.
I think she calls it socialist though.
Socialist government, had these special economic zones and blah, 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 blah. Really?
Well, I think what it is with these journalists is like Marianne Tham, Richard Poplak's also an example, Farrell Hafaji, and even Max de Pree. When Julius Malema first rose to prominence, everybody was like, geez, such a great guy. And especially when he started the EFF, like, this is like a really important voice we need in our politics. And they ignored all the warning signs between Malema. The on-point corruption stuff happened when he was still in the ANC. When the Kwesi rape trial happened with Jacob Zuma, he said vile things about Kwesi, how she actually enjoyed being, she wasn't raped because the court found she wasn't raped, but obviously something dodgy happened. But Julius Malema said that she obviously enjoyed it, and how it can be rape if a woman enjoyed it and waited for taxi money and all kinds of awful things. And he said horrible things about he was a race baiter when he was still in the ANC. He said terrible things to journalists when he was still in the ANC. So people, I don't know where they thought he went under this Damascene conversion when he left the ANC. He hasn't changed he hasn't changed his ways. And we've seen this. And journalists in South Africa gave him a free ride for a very long time, and only now when he started taking his claws out towards journalists. And Farrell Hafaji is also, she didn't say anything about Julius Malema until he started saying terrible things about Indians. Then suddenly he wasn't such a nice guy. So, the chickens are coming home to roost a lot of the ways for the EFF and some journalists as well.
Yeah. I remember very early on when they started to pay attention to Julius while he was still in the ANC. I wondered, I know he's dynamic and he's interesting and he's different, and that obviously is going to attract media attention. But I remember thinking, but hang on, he doesn't represent anything. He doesn't represent any aspect of policy. He's not a spokesman for the ANC. The ANCYL is a youth organisation and must be seen and not heard. And they gave him so much space. And then when people started to criticise the media coverage, the media said, and essentially say they're creating Julius, the media said, no, he's just newsworthy.
Guys, we're going to move on. And before we do, let me just make a point clear. None of us here have a problem with people who are well-heeled, enjoying their money, doing their thing. That's not the issue here. The two issues really is the hypocrisy of that same individual telling and prescribing to others how they should live a frugal life, a life representing of the poor. And on the other hand, and as Morris raised, the idea that this money that they could be blowing isn't necessarily coming out of their own pockets. It could be coming from allegedly illicit sources like VBS or even the state.
But I just want to make the point that Sarah raised just before we started talking, that if we had to go through probably any major DA leaders trash. They'd probably actually come out, there'd maybe be a couple of Castle Light bottles
and some chips.
Some
tofu boxes and
some receipts from Woolies. So I mean, that's for all the criticism of the DA. I think that's one thing. If you go through Mushima Mine stuff or John Steenhuisen and stuff, it'd probably be, I doubt there'd be many things for Maurice Champagne, many receipts for that.
All right, guys, let's move on. And ironically, still sticking with the EFF, because there's a more substantive and more interesting thing that I think we should start writing about going forward, and especially as we head towards the local government elections. EFF is all over the headlines at the moment. They will no longer support the DA in the various, or I can't really call them coalitions.
Metro,
They've always steadfastly said they are not in coalition with the DA. But essentially, they're now saying that they'll no longer vote in favor or in support of the DA, thereby threatening essentially the stability of these coalitions. What do we make of that?
I can understand. I could understand that as a political tactic if it was indicating or at least hinting that it would be supporting the ANC. But this morning, one of the statements I read by Malema was that the EFF would no longer be supporting the DA or the ANC. Now, what fascinates me about that is if, for example, either the ANC went into coalition with the DA or went into coalition with others that gave them the majority, the EFF would virtually disappear because its power would go. I'm not quite sure I understand. I think maybe I've misunderstood something.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you must also remember that the EFF is not interested in constitutional parliamentary government. So for them, that's fine for them to become an extra parliamentary movement. When Malema said recently he's prepared, he said it before, but he said now recently again, prepared to take arms up against White and against who, I'm not too sure. Because, I mean, as much as a lot of people dislike the ANC, they are the legitimate government of South Africa. They won the election fair and square. And I'm not an ANC voter, but I would oppose any move to remove the ANC militarily, to be honest. I mean, they're the legitimate democratic government of the country. And we can oppose them through civil society, through rights in the media, through opposition political parties, but not through violence.
But what's interesting is that their opposition, certainly national government, taking on or sharing the sort of load with the DA, challenging the ANC legally on a whole lot of, has been successful. I mean, they've appeared to be a kosher. They've really considered what they're doing and they're going about it in a parliamentary manner. So this smacks again of a certain level of desperation coming out of their falling by the wayside in a whole lot of other areas.
Well, I don't think I think it's actually quite targeted and it's quite vindictive, and I'll tell you why. My theory, and it's not so much my theory as it is what they've been saying. After this election, Julius came out and the EFF came out basically saying, look, we're now transcending and moving beyond this idea of just voting in and voting for certain parties. We now want a stake at the table with his, crosshairs sort of set on Tshwane, right? We want the mayorship of Tshwane. They can keep the MMCs, and vice versa. In Johannesburg, we want the MMC positions. They can keep their mayorship. There's something very dodgy about that. Why was it suddenly after the growth of the party and presumably, the development of having more constituents within, or rather more people to please within your own ranks, why was there suddenly a rush to acquire power? And with power, as we know, the likes of Malema et al. And, a lot of these allegations, of course, don't sue us. But essentially what we've seen before is, when there is a sniff of them having power, you start hearing the allegations of, tender deals going this way towards them, money being funneled towards them. Why was there suddenly an urgency for him to have power after the election? And I got a theory, and I want you guys to comment on my theory. I want to hear what your views are on this. Is that with the growth of the EFF came the need for Malema to perhaps look at new and more ways at dispensing patronage, that a seat in parliament wasn't enough because the party grew organically, that with that growth comes in new people who he has to either, be an authoritative leader to suppress them, in other words, suppress any potential for them to rise up against him within the ranks, because we've never really seen an elective Congress within the EFF yet.
That's one thing you can say in 10 or 15 years' time. Musi will not be ahead of the DA. Ramaphosa will not be ahead of the ANC. Malema, if he doesn't go back to ANC, he will most probably still be in charge of the EFF. That is a guarantee.
And that's my feeling. That's my hunch. That the next step for him at a strategic level, if I were him, and I had his alleged dubious ways of doing things, would then to want to have power in order to be able to dispense some form of patronage to suppress any sort of rancor about me in the party. What do you guys think about that theory?
I think that's very possible, but it would in fact alienate a whole lot of fairly new supporters, because judging by the interviews you did at the EFF rally, I got the sense of really people wanting very common sense change, really nuts and bolts stuff. There was no vitriol, there was no excess, there was nothing. It's just that they saw the EFF as the strong party who could deliver it. And if Julius sees his power based in increasing his patronage networks, that is bound to have an effect on his newly found electorate.
Morris, thoughts?
I think, just one thing with the EFF, I think they're very good at identifying the problems in South Africa. Just their solutions are not very good. And to Malema's credit, he is prepared to say things that nobody else is prepared to say. And sometimes he's very wrong, but sometimes he is right. And he does call out things that everybody else is too scared to call out, actually. So, I mean, in another world, Julius Malema would have been, I don't know, he would definitely be a brilliant marketing guy. I mean, they're red in those overalls. I mean, it's a great political theatre.
Albeit they copied the Socialist Party of Venezuela, but anyway.
No, of course. But
But it also reflects a certain. It's starting to look like a theatre of the absurd, because given the increasing deterioration of their reputation, to have people still sitting in Parliament wearing dukes and jumpsuits and hard hats is kind of a bit pathetic.
Guys, final thoughts on this particular topic before we move on. And let me segue back or bring it back towards where we began this conversation. The upcoming municipal elections, they're only 2 years away. Let's move on. Let's move on from one form of hate and hate mongering, lol, to another form of it. Anti-Semitism. Sarah, I'm going to look straight at you at this one because I know you have you have a piece that you put out today in the Daily Friend. Guys, remember, all of our pieces and all the analysis that you often hear us talk about here can be found on the Daily Friend website. That's dailyfriend.co.za. Sarah, anti-Semitism, what are we looking at? What does your piece talk about?
My piece basically talks about the fact that Israel and its opponents are actually at war. It's less a conflict about land than it actually is an almost centuries old war. And I explain the reasons for it, and it has to do. And I've in fact seen it confirmed this morning. It's largely a religious war. And I'm explaining why it's largely a religious war and why it will not end anytime soon. And that the West Bank and the occupation of the West Bank is the occasion around which all of this revolves, but it is not the essence of the conflict. And what I've done is I've used it to explain to people what may not be known by most people about this conflict and about anti-Semitism in general. It was quite interesting because one of our colleagues said, well, yes, what does this have to do with South Africa? And I'll answer that. And the other one said, fascinating, I've never seen this before. And the reason it has to do with South Africa is because there's been such a global rise in anti-Semitism, and South Africa has not been immune. There's been extraordinarily vituperative anti-Semitism expressed on social media. The ANC government is not friendly to the Jewish community generally, and particularly to Israel.
Regardless of its posturing.
Regardless of its posturing. And given all the other problems with South Africa, you've got political insecurity, economic insecurity, and you've got now the added feeling that we are maybe not even just disliked, we are hated. And the Jewish community is at risk. It's now down to 50,000 Jews from a peak of 120,000. And some people say that within a decade it'll be, as used to say, Judenfrei. And I think people need to know about it, even if it sounds staid, it isn't. Absolutely, and I think it tracks to an extent, larger debate around South Africans who are just leaving. They're choosing to leave.
Could I just ask you a question quick?
Talk to me.
Were you in Germany last week and you wore your yarmulke?
Yes.
I was wondering because I read a thing saying Jews in Germany were being advised not to wear them because...
And that's exactly why I wore my yarmulke.
Was it fun?
Look, there is a vlog coming on this where I essentially walk the streets of Berlin with my kippah on.
Black Jewish guy.
I'll tell you what, I think that really helps. Like firstly, there's a confusion. Like, whoa, what's going on?
What do we go
and
for?
And then secondly, the fear. Like, which side of him will react more? No, look, and just to maybe bring it back to what Sarah's saying, anti-Semitism is a very big problem, and it is rearing its head around the world. I think we South Africans are, to an extent, and I say this with a pinch of salt, we're luckier maybe insofar as an individual Jew, we still have the ability to defend ourselves. The ANC government hasn't quite yet gotten rid of our ability to own weapons. And again, I say this because I made this point in Germany, much to the shock of the Germans. You have guns in South Africa? I'm like, yes, for very good reason. It stops exactly the sort of, it stops the sort of hate manifesting itself in someone wanting to hurt you. Again, not entirely. I'm not making some sort of weird argument that, if everybody had guns, I don't know, please. But there is that element, and I digress. What I wanted to say was this. My experience in Germany really taught me a lesson around, one, a community has to be united. It has to stand together against any forms of hatred against, especially minority communities, because Jews over there, of course, are a minority, and here too. And in this country in particular, you have hate groups in particular that target minorities, whether it's white individuals, farmers, Indians, and funny, these three all have sort of the EFF at its roots, but nonetheless, there are other hate groups. The point being, these groups have to actually stick together in order to tackle any forms of hate around it.
Okay. The reason I feel so strongly about getting out the message is because anti-Semitism, although they call it the eldest hatred, there's absolutely no justification for it. I mean, there is nothing that any Jewish group can be accused of. Now, so what makes the times different now is it's being largely based and centered around Israel's occupation of the West Bank.
Yes.
And there's a narrative around that is just so false in so many respects, and I'm going to look at that narrative and deal with it. That's, people keep saying there's now a move, particularly on campuses, for people to say, but if you say I'm being anti-Zionist and therefore I'm anti-Semitic, you're interfering with my freedom of speech to criticize the state of Israel. The response is, criticize the state of Israel. Everyone criticizes the Israeli government, not least of all the Israelis themselves. Yeah. But it's when you make that accusation, it's almost never about criticizing the Israeli government. It's the anti-Zionism is an expression of anti-Semitism.
It's a sleight of hand in most of them. But anyway, looking forward to that piece. I will be reading that. Morris, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Sarah, always good to have you on. And good to have you watch the show and join us. Guys, as always, you can find the pieces that we write on, all the analysis in the Daily Friend. Everything we discuss here is on there, so you can always check that out, dailyfriend.co.za. And hey, support the work that we do. And you can do that by becoming a friend of the IRR. That's our crowdfunding campaign, where all you need to do to donate 90 Rand a month, or between 70 and 90 Rand a month, is SMS your name to 32823. An SMS will cost you 1 Rand, and terms and conditions do apply. But if you don't like SMSs because you think, hey, old school, who still does that? Well, you can find us online at irr.org.za/join, and you can sign up for a monthly debit order there. Guys, remember to look out for The Daily Friend. We come out on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and a podcast once a week. And, of course, keep your eyes tuned to the Big Liberty Show. And you can find both of these shows on the IRR's YouTube page, or, of course, on my YouTube page as Big Daddy Liberty. Hit that bell notification so you're always notified by our... when we put out our videos, and of course, like, share, and subscribe. Share the video as much as you can. Guys, we'll see you on Friday.